afternoon to everybody. As promised last week, hello. As we discussed last week, I tried to contact Professor Roy and I could not get an appointment, but I tried to pursue, and because of different engagements, I will try to pursue, and if possible, I will try to include his inputs also in the next presentation, and I mean week 6 session. So if everything is alright, we can begin this session. And just let me know if my voice is audible to everyone. If there is any issue, I will just try to. Okay, hope it is audible to everyone. So,
Yes, sir, you are audible.
okay. In that case, we can begin with the presentation. Okay, welcome to week 5 doubt clearing session, that is problem solving session for housing policy and planning. So, uh, let us actually go through it in a systematic way where we try to see few questions from the past years, and then we look at each and every option. Then also, if there is something important which we can discuss with respect to each and every option, apart from the discussions which we have been doing as part of the NPTEL MO session, we can also discuss extra knowledge which is associated with the respective subject, and we can also try to learn more associated with it. So, CPHWO manual by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, deals with which of the following services. So, CPHWO, it is broadly refers to the Center for Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization. So we have 4 options here: sewerage, public transportation, telecommunication, and housing. So first of all, let us try to understand what does Center for Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization refers to. So CPHW, Center for Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization, it has been established by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Right now it is under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, but as earlier it used to be known as Ministry of Urban Development. However, when the organization was formed, it was formed in 1954. It was initially under the Environmental Hygiene Committee, that is the Ministry of Health, Works and Housing. However, Ministry of Health, so initially it was under the Ministry of Health. In 1974, it has been transferred to the Ministry of Urban Development. So it is basically a technical institution which works under the Ministry of Urban Development. That is presently it is known as Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So it is basically focusing on the associated things with respect to the public health engineering and environmental engineering in the urban areas of India. So which functions, because the question is asking us what does the CPHW manual by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, the Government of India, deals with. So there are different manuals that have been framed by the Center for Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization. So for this thing, I have browsed to the CPHW website, that is cphw.gov.in. So there have been different manuals which have been developed by the CPHW over a period of time from the 1999 to 2019. There have been different manuals. The first one was in 2000. First one was in 1999. It was developed the manual on water supply and treatment. So it basically discusses about how the water after procuring the water from the reservoirs, and how to treat them, and how to maintain a proper quality for the different purposes, potable uses and other different uses in the urban areas. So this is how the manual for water supply and treatment has been developed in 1999. Then in 2000, Municipal Solid Waste Management Manual has been given, in which that solid waste collection, the segregation at source, and segregation, and how to dispose of the different types of solid waste, that also discussed in this manual. Then manual on operation and maintenance of water supply system. Operational maintenance refers to the after the initial investment and we develop the project, and how we keep the water supply system in operating capacity over the period of time. That manual was developed in 2005, and similarly sewerage and sewage treatment was developed in 2013. And again, municipal solid waste management, again there was another manual which was developed in 2016. The stormwater and drainage systems was developed in 2009. So given the 4 options, let us discuss. The first one is sewage. It is the correct option because seepage manual, as we discussed in the previous slide. it has established, it has developed a manual in 2013 on the manual on sewerage and sewage treatment system. So that the correct answer is sewerage. Then public transport, telecommunication, housing, and there are different organizations with respect to each and every one of them again. So which is actually not a part of this study. So we will write it here. Then let us proceed to the second. Before going to second question, again. Let us look at one of the important contributions of CPSW in terms of urban development and urban services procurement and urban service delivery in Indian cities. So the service level benchmarking, there is a concept of service level benchmarking where the quality of service, quality of water supply, quality of sewage management, quality of the solid waste management, and quality of stormwater management. So there are these broad four categories of physical infrastructure services, which have been benchmarked, so that there is an established benchmark over which all the different cities, their performance with respect to these services can actually be compared, and the governments will disperse the funds with respect to their actual existing performance. So in this context, there are 9 different indicators associated with water supply. So for example, if we take the coverage of water supply connection, it means the percentage of total number of households that are having a piped water supply in the household. So that is what it means. So it is actually covering the 100%. Similarly, per capita water supply. So it's like the benchmark, the service level benchmark for the per capita water supply. The per capita water supply is the indicator of proposed indicator of the water supply service. And if a city has average supply of 135 liters per person every day, LPCD refers to the liter per capita per day. So then the city is considered to be providing efficient and sufficient amount of water for the citizens. So similarly, there are different indicators with respect to water supply over which the performance of the water supply, urban local body, the municipal corporation, again similarly, different terminologies again, municipal corporation, maybe municipality, or the Nagar Panchayat, or even the town panchayat, different words which we use for the similar the statutory urban local body. So the performance is actually compared based on these benchmarks. If a city is crossing this benchmark, that means it is performing well. Similarly, there are different indicators like continuity of water supply, average water supply per day. It is benchmarked at 24 hours, which is highly ambitious as we know for the Indian cities, but most of the Indian cities are still struggling at 1 or 2 hours of supply at alternate day frequency also. So, but there are certain ambitious service benchmarks set for Indian cities, because it is very important for us also to know how whenever housing is established, important physical infrastructure services are also provided. So CPSW in this context helps the Indian government, the central government and the state governments to compare different cities, how they are performing with respect to each and every services. So there are 9 indicators for water supply. So 9 indicators for sewage management, the coverage of toilets, how many percentage houses are having toilets, the coverage of sewage network, how many percentage of these toilets are having the sewage network connected to the sewage network, centralized sewage network in the city, the collection efficiency, amount of the total waste generated that is collected. So similarly, there are different indicators, and all these benchmarks have been established to compare again. Similarly, the third major physical infrastructure sector, that CPSW has prepared a manual, and there are 8 different indicators to assess the performance of solid waste management. So the household level coverage of solid waste management services. So household level, it's mentioned that 100%, all the households within the city should be having a household level coverage. Some kind of mechanism, either door to door or the common way, the solid waste should be collected from the each and every household present in the city. So there are 8 different indicators. So it is not only from the side of the household or the side of the user point of view, it is also the utility point of view, the urban local body point of view. If you see the 3 indicators, for example, in water supply, cost recovery in water supply services, it says like it is also important for the urban local body to provide the required amount of water to the users, but also it should also be able to recover the cost which it has incurred while providing this particular service. So it should be in a sustainable way, so that it should not go into the depths in order to provide this service. Similarly, it is for sewage management, also for the solid waste management, and similarly the stormwater drainage. Stormwater drainage refers to the natural drainage, the water that is falling from the rainfall, the precipitation, and how it is flowing within the city. So there is a coverage of stormwater drainage and etc. So there are 28 different indicators, 9 plus 9 plus 9, 18, 26 and 28. So 28 different indicators, 9 for water supply, 9 for sewage management, 8 for solid waste management, and 2 for solid water damage. So these are developed by the CPSW, Center for Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization, which actually works under the Ministry of Urban Development. So as we discussed earlier, so this is an allied discipline. However, this is very important for us to know because the physical infrastructure services form a very crucial part of the housing service, because without water supply, without proper sewage network, without proper stormwater drainage and solid waste management, it will be very difficult for the residents to stay in a particular place. So now let us, in a similar way, let us discuss the second question. So, which of the following is the correct sequence of stages to formulate the housing strategies? So, you remember the week 5 sessions again. So there are 7 steps of housing strategy preparation for in the Indian city. So we have discussed in detail in the session again. So we can revise through this question again anyway, so that we can also have a proper answer at the end of the day. So the first, there are 7 steps. The first step is study of existing situation, in which we study the existing housing stock, how much housing stock is available, how many houses are there, and how many of them are in a livable condition, not dilapidated, etc. Then housing typology we discussed, again informal housing and formal housing and organic quadrants. So how many type of houses are available in different things. Then land profile, the availability of land, the value of the land that is available, and the topography and the suitability of the land to develop housing in this context, and housing finance and organizational capacity. Then we set the aim and objectives. So for example, if a city is having adequate amount of high income housing, but the next level of MIG and LIG housing is a problem. So we set an aim and objective based on the existing situation. So existing situation we study, we identify the gap, and based on that gap we frame a vision and set aim and objectives. Then do the analysis where we estimate the housing demand, what is the existing situation, and we analyze the demand, what are the existing trends and preferences, how much land is available, the possible investment options, and the SWOT analysis. Then we do the synthesis. We come to a synthesis and we come to a conclusion of the analysis, that we try to match how much supply of housing is there, and is it matching with the demand. Then we create a scenario, then the development strategy for the procurement of land and financing, then the development, controlling, and implementation. Finally, we prepare an action plan in the form of phasing, how are we going to implement the project. So if you look at these 4 options, the first option is study of existing situation. After that one, immediately the next one is to prepare aim and objectives and analysis. So this is not the correct option, it directly goes to action plan. Then the synthesis actually comes after the analysis. So the correct option for this question is the study of existing situation. Then we analyze, if you can note, if you look at this one, certain steps have been missing, but however the entire gist of the process of formulation of housing strategy can be discussed here. So study of existing situation, then we frame the aim and objectives, then we do the analysis, then we do the synthesis, then we go for the building scenarios, then we prepare a housing strategy, finally we go for an action plan to implement the housing related project. So this is how it works. So then again, let's go to the third question. According to the URDPFI guidelines, the senior secondary school is provided for the population of dash served for the so we know URDPFI guidelines actually give us multiple standards. So again, so it is not only pertaining to the education facilities, it is also pertaining to the health related facilities, recreational facilities, and electricity, even the physical infrastructure facilities. There are a wide set of guidelines which have been provided by the URDPFI guidelines, that is Urban and Regional Development Planning Formulation and Implementation Guidelines. How, as the statement itself says, Urban and Regional Development Planning, for that one formulation and implementation, how to formulate and implement the urban and regional and development plans. So these are the guidelines that help us in formulating and implementing this URDP. So that is how it's so. So for example, in this context, It is not a necessary standard. So you should try to understand the difference between a guideline and a standard again. So when URDPFI guidelines, when we say URDPFI is guideline, it is guiding how we can develop a particular city or a particular neighborhood or a particular sector. But that does not mean it is an established standard that I should definitely provide provide a senior secondary school at a 7,500 population limits. So we can look at our immediate neighborhoods and immediate surroundings, and it is not a practice norm or a practice standard, but it is just a guideline. It will be a beneficial factor if we can follow this guideline, and that will be helpful for the cities to have effective accessibility to the different housing services. So the correct answer for this particular question is 7,500. So according to URDPFI guidelines, a senior secondary school with a minimum capacity of 1,000 students should be provided at a population of 7,500. So again, let us try to briefly look at the URDPFI guidelines also once again. So URDPFI guidelines, they refer to the urban and regional development plan formulation and implementation guidelines. So how to formulate and also how to implement the urban and regional development plans. So urban and regional development plans, again, as we discussed in the previous sessions and multiple different sessions also, they vary from one state to another. There are different hierarchy of planning again, starting from the annual plans, development plan, master plan, perspective plans, etc. So whatever the plan may be, at different spatial scales, how to formulate these plans and how to implement these plans. So these are a set of guidelines developed by the Town and Country Planning Organization of India under the Ministry of Urban Development. Present it is under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So these guidelines actually provide. So let us look at the brief samples of whatever the things which we can see with respect to this. So urban and regional development plans, formulation and implementation guidelines. Before URDPFI, whatever we had was similar guidelines, set of guidelines have been prepared in the year of 1996, again by the TCPO under the Ministry of Urban Affairs and Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. We need not get confused because the name of the ministry has been changing over the period of time again. Earlier it was known as Ministry of Urban Affairs and Employment, then it was known as Ministry of Urban Development, then it is presently it is known as Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So there are different names, but ministries has been relatively the same. So Ministry of Urban Affairs, erstwhile Ministry of Urban Affairs and Employment, presently the MOU, Ministry of Urban Development, has developed this Urban Development Plan Formulation and Implementation Guidelines in 1996, and it has been changed, and there have been certain changes made into it in 2014, and Urban and Regional Development Plan. So it is not just urban development. Now we have added the surrounding rural areas, outgrowths, urban fringe areas, or the suburban areas. So these are also need to be holistically developed along with the core city and the mother city. So urban and regional development plans, formulation and implementation guidelines have been developed by the ministry and accordingly have been adopted by different states also. So, okay. Pardon me, I think there have been certain people are requesting for the waiting for the waiting in the app. So now, as we have discussed, and the URDPFI is just like it's an updated version of the UDPFI as well UDPFI. So and let us look at the different samples of what this will discuss, because they give us the gist of how the development planning process should be in Indian cities. So it gives us a set of guidelines how we can classify the different cities and what are the different types of densities that should be present in these cities and what is a metropolitan city and etc. etc. So in this context, I am just trying to give a sample of what we discussed with what should be the average density on the developed area. So this is basically the gross density of the cities that it is trying to mention in plain areas and hill areas. So, and again, it is based on the settlement type. Of course, if you remember, if we can look at this one, small towns, medium town, large cities, metropolitan cities, and megapolis. It has a separate population definition again in the URDPFI guidelines again. So, like metropolitan cities are the ones which are having more than 10 lakh population, large cities having 10 to 5 lakh population, medium town is 1 lakh to 5 lakh population, and finally small town is something that is having less than 1 lakh population. So megapolis is something that is having more than 1 crore population. So similarly, uh, these categories, again, how the population density should be distributed. So this is just an example what actually URDPFI tries to give us, what we can understand from the URDPFI. So for example, this particular table which I have taken a screenshot from the URDPFI guidelines is basically giving us the average area densities. How much density should be there in these towns and cities based on their population size. So that is given in the terms of persons per hectare. In a metropolitan city, it can be 125 to 175 persons per hectare. And in a hill area, that cannot be practiced, because in hill areas, because of slope and multiple difficulties with respect to the disaster proneness and environmental issues, it should be less than what it should be in hill areas. So there is no discrimination. However, with respect to the development that should be happening in different types of topography in India, there has been a different set of guidelines which have been provided by UNDP. So similarly, and as with respect to the housing area, we just saw the example of the education facility in terms of the senior secondary schools that have to be provided for which population unit. Similarly, there are different phases of parks that have to be provided again similarly to the different population units and area requirements. For example, housing area park should be provided for the 5,000 population, and the area of the park should be 0.5 hectares. And similarly, neighborhood park is provided with the 50,000 population and with an minimum area of 1 hectare. So similarly, further again, community park 1 lakh population and 5 hectares of area, district park of 5 lakh population and 25 hectares of area, subcity park of 10 lakh population, 100 hectares of area. So this is a provided guideline. Again, please keep in mind, this is not an established standard. It is just a guideline, and it can be practiced. As it has been practiced in certain contexts, has not been practiced in certain contexts. So in the same in the similar way, let us go to the question number 4 again. So consider the following sentence and choose the correct option. Housing strategy for core city area and peri-urban areas are usually different, because in core city areas, if we remember the second session of this week, in which we try to discuss the different housing strategies that are meant for the core city areas and peri-urban areas. Core city areas, they usually have the redensifying and the de-densifying strategies. And whereas when it comes to the peri-urban areas, it is in core city areas, it is usually the redensification. When it comes to the peri-urban, it is usually the redensification. So this is how it is practiced. So in core city areas, the housing strategies are different because it is usually organic growth. There is usually inadequate provision of the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, social infrastructure facilities. However, when it comes to the peri-urban areas, it is usually the widespread, the development is usually scattered, so there is a need for the redensifying these areas. So the strategies are developed in such a way that core cities areas are de-densified and infrastructure is provided to all the residents accordingly, whereas when it comes to peri-urban areas, the redensification is carried out so that the development actually comes into the proper shape, and in order that will actually aid the urban local bodies to provide the physical infrastructure and social infrastructure services properly. And again, next we will let us go to the fifth question, the last question for this session again. So, effective method for making land available for creating new housing. So there are different tools of land management tools which have been discussed in this one. So the first one is TDR, that refers to the transferable development rights. And the second option is land assembly, rehabilitation, and the redevelopment. So if you look at these options again, to create a new housing, whatever we need is to have a land assembly. First of all, the first requirement to have any greenfield development, to develop any new town, is to have an adequate amount of ground. So if you look at other options which we could not accept for this particular question, the first one is transferable development rights. So it usually talks about credit-based credit FSI with respect that we transfer from one area to another area within the same zone, within the same jurisdiction of area, so that we can transfer the amount of development that can be done from one place to another. We can also sell those rights also. So It is basically nothing but the shift from one point to another, so it is not directly aiding us to create in new housing. Similarly, rehabilitation and redevelopment. Both the strategies are usually applied in the existing development, organic and unauthorized development, both contexts again. So that it can also help them to reorganize the settlement, lay proper roads and infrastructure services, and accordingly development. So rehabilitation is usually for the slums, and redevelopment is for different types of settlements that are already existing and having inadequate services. So land assembly, that is procuring the adequate amount of land for developing housing, is the key method that we require to adopt for developing any new type of housing in Indian cities. So in this context, I wanted to discuss in brief about what actually transferable development rights are and how they are used as a key tool by different cities in India. So there has been a detailed guidelines that have been developed by the NITI Aayog in 2020. So there's a detailed report. I'll also share that one with you through the Google Drive link. So this transferable development, as the term stands, a transferable development. We are trying to transfer the development rights from one person to other, or from one point of the city to another point of the city. So these guidelines are developed for implementation of TDR tool for achieving urban infrastructure transition in India. So again, if you look at it, after housing, along with housing, the important tool is infrastructure. So transferable development rights actually talk this as a tool in Indian context. So let us have a brief discussion about it, because what TDR means from the central point of view, what TDR means to a urban local body or urban development authority is very much different. So what TDR actually has been defined as with respect to the central government, that is NITI Aayog. They have developed these guidelines in 2020. So it means award specifying the built-up area. So the built-up area, either the landowner can either sell and utilize it within this area, or within the different areas within the municipal boundary. So it is usually based on with respect to the FSI, the flow space index, which can be utilized accordingly. So it is required to be so let us go through the whole statement here. So in lieu of the land foregone on account of surrendering or gifting land free of cost to the ULBs. Usually ULBs actually try to have some kind of service. For example, in core area, if you want to decongest, in order to decongest, we try to reduce the FSI and then try to provide a credit FSI in a different part within the same zone, so that you decongest in some part and develop the physical infrastructure accordingly, and also let them not lose their right of development in the same area by providing them the option to either sell or reutilize within the similar zone, the zone which it is existing within. So again, required to be set apart for public purpose. So the urban local body actually tries to regulate the development with using the areas in this way. So in order to we can see different purposes that have been listed here. So as per the master plan, or for road widening, or recreational use zone, or even for the development of roads. And this award is in the form of TDR certificates. So the competent authority, the Urban Development Authority, or in Maharashtra usually it is also known as Improvement Trust. For example, Nagpur Improvement Trust, and in different states is also known as Urban Development Authority or Regional Development Authorities. These competent authorities, or even urban local bodies, they can issue these TDR certificates, so that you can transfer this development rights to a different part of the city. So this mentions the different amount of area surrounded, and accordingly the cost of the area with respect to the circle. So it is not usually just based on the amount of area that has been surrendered, because area surrendered in a core city might have different set of values from the area that is in the outskirts of the city. So definite zonings are made with respect to the TDR, so that the amount of FSI that has been sacrificed in one part of the city should be used within the similar areas or within the same zone of the city. So these certificates are regulated under building bylaws, and actually these TDR guidelines are framed by the state government. State governments have also incorporated them into their respective development control regulations, the DCRs also. So now, with respect to Maharashtra state, I try to redefine what it actually means again. So TDR certificate, which we have discussed again. So what it means is transferable development right. It's a compensation. So it is actually a compensation. The way you sacrifice something in one point of space, you will get it as a developable right in different part of the city. So in the form of floor space index or the development rights, we shall entitle the owner for construction of built-up area subject to provisions in this regulation. So it says the FSI credit shall be issued in the term of a certificate, and this certificate is known as development right certificate. So once I sacrifice like 0.5 FSI in one part of the city, I can use it within the same zone of in the different part of the same city using this development right certificate, and it shall be issued by the urban development authorities, and it is based on the land, the cost of the land in these particular regions. So again, the TDR generated within the jurisdiction of particular, it should be utilized within the same jurisdiction of the same authority again. So for example, I am having I am have there has been some kind of surrender of FSI within core city area. I cannot use it within the in the outskirts of the city where the land rate is less. So with respect to the same thing, it should be used within the same limits. So there are certain examples which have been listed in the TDR guidelines, which has been discussed by NITI Aayog in 2020. So for example, how this TDR has been used in different contexts of these different cities again. In Mumbai, slum TDRs are there in order to redevelop and rehabilitate the slums, and heritage TDRs are there. And similarly in Ahmedabad, for heritage conservation, rehabilitation of slums, redevelopment of public housing, they have used for different purposes TDRs again. In Hyderabad, to develop the roads and road developments that have been provided under master plan, to develop them, to procure the required amount, to have adequate amount of land for these purposes, they have also used TDRs. And similarly to conserve the lakes and the natural bodies which have some ecological value, and they are sensitive to the environmental issues. So these kind of conservation factors are multiple factors as well. So TDR has widely been used in Indian cities in order to have different purposes. So actually this is the brief presentation for today. I hope everyone has gone through the whole presentation again. So if you have any questions, and we can also discuss again, because certain few of you have joined later on. I'd be really happy to go through all the slides once again, so that we can go have very brief discussion of whatever we have discussed again. So if there are any doubts, they are welcome. You can either ask me through your by unmuting yourself, or even you can ask me through your chat box.
Sir, can we get the reading material of this?
Sure. Actually, the reading material has actually been shared with all of you through from the NPTEL organizers themselves. So there has been a Google Drive and Google folder that has been created on the Google Drive, and it is actually shared with all of you. In case there is some kind of issue, I'll try to share with all of you after the session also, anyways.
Okay.
Sure. Because there has been a week-wise schedule again. There is one folder, and week-wise there are sub-folders, and the detail along with the presentation there is also some kind of material.
Okay.
Okay. With respect to the re-densification and de-densification and re-densification, different concepts, and core cities. Okay. Okay, there have been multiple examples with respect to this de-densification. For example, I have referred different projects again. Within India, there is a project in Indore under the Smart City project, the Rajwada Palace area. So there is a de-densification project where they wanted to widen the roads and de-densify this area. So they have procured some land from the existing landowners, widen the roads, and develop the core city area. This is in the core city area. So core city area is usually the de-densification, because it's usually a congested space already. So you want to decongest it. So you want to remove any extra additional pressure, additional what do you say? Additional capacity that has actually been occupied by the people. So there is a limit of population density. Additional population density you can accommodate it accordingly. So to do this kind of de-densification, there are examples. One of the major example is one of the major example which I have studied is Rajwada Palace restoration project under the smart city project in Indore. Actually, I'm not sure about the existing uh, status of it right now, but I'll try to share through my screen right now. Okay, it is possible. So under this I hope the screen is visible to everyone. This under Indore Smart City Corporation, Smart City Development Limited. So this basically an organization. So the which so it is basically a tender document, but whatever it has been discussed is it is basically the conservation, restoration and redevelopment of this area. So for this one they have to de-densify, they have to reduce the density of the area. So that is how the de-densification has been practiced. There are multiple studies, but I currently have not prepared any study with respect to this one as with a prepared, but if it is required I can make a detailed presentation in the next presentation anyway with respect to this one in certain examples of it. But you can refer to these documents again whenever possible. I'll try to share if I find any relevant document with respect to this one. And again, I think it was Reena herself who has asked that with respect to that question. Hope that question that problem is solved. If it is not solved, I'll try to.
Yes, sir, solved.
Okay.
Thank you. So there was one more issue about the notes that we only have the presentation shared in the NPTEL folder. There are no separate notes as such. So if it is possible for you, please can you mail or maybe share here.
Actually, that was not part of my
Okay.
problem of anyway, but still I'll try to communicate it to the respective team if it is possible. So again, anyway, if you have any further doubts, we can discuss it accordingly. In case there are no doubts, we'll just go through all the slides once again because you have joined little late and you might have missed certain questions. So is it okay if I go through the whole presentation once again so that we can revise and wind up accordingly? Okay, in that case, I'm just sharing my screen. So, okay, once again, let's go through the important questions. CPHW, that refers to the Center for Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization. So, public health engineering, it usually consists of water supply, sewage, sanitation, and everything. So it was initially established in 1954 on the Ministry of Health, but later on transferred to the Ministry of Urban Development in 1974. It usually prepares the manuals associated with the water supply, municipal solid waste management, sewage and sewage management and stormwater drainage system. So the correct answer for this question is sewage. CPSU manual deals with sewage related manuals, water supply related manuals, water quality related manuals and solid waste management manuals. Basically the services associated with the physical infrastructure. So again we discussed in brief about the different service benchmarks that have been established by the CPSW and which are used by the Ministry of Urban Development to compare different cities, how they are performing with respect to the benchmarks for each and every performance indicator. So there are 28 indicators, 9 for the water supply, 9 for sewage management, 8 for solid waste management and 2 for the stormwater drainage. And what is the correct sequence of the stage or the sequence of the stages in formulating the housing strategies? So there are 7 different steps in its formulation of housing strategies. The first one is the study of existing situation, in which we study the existing housing stock, what are the different typology of housing and the existing land profile, where if the land is available in different parts of the city and what is the land value of different parts of the city and the topographic suitability of each and every pocket of the city. So this, even if the land is available, is it suitable for construction? So all of it we check it. What are the different finance options available for the people, and finally the organizational capacity. Then we look at the gap, what is the different challenges which are happening within the city with respect to the existing situation, then we frame a vision accordingly. We set a name and objective, then go for an analysis in which we estimate the existing housing demand, look at the trend and preferences in the housing patterns, and then the availability of lands, and what are the possible investment options, perform a SWOT analysis, and conclude it in the form of synthesis, where we match the existing supply of the housing and the existing housing demand. We create different scenarios and then select one of the scenarios and prepare a detailed development strategy, and how to procure the land, what are the different finance mechanisms that can be adopted, then what the different development controls need to be there, and implement accordingly using the action plan to the different phases. And it is important for us to know that the housing strategy is usually prepared after the preparation of the master plans or the perspective plans for the respective cities. So the correct option is study of the existing situation, analysis, then synthesis, and finally the action plan is prepared. According to URDPFI guidelines, senior secondary school should be provided for the population of 7,500 people, and the student strength should be 1,000. And there have been area requirements and other standards which have been given with respect to the NBC, the National Building Code. Again, it says that the area of the school should be minimum of 1.8 hectares, with again the reclassified into three different. Again, school building should be of 0.6 hectares, playfield should be of 1 hectare, and the parking area should be of 0.2 hectares. So it has given clear specification, and we should remember that it is not a clear straightforward standard, but it is just a guideline that can be adopted for the effective provision of services for the people in the urban areas. And then the correct answer is the 7,500 persons. Then we have looked at it what URDPFI and how it developed from the existing UDPFI guidelines of 1996. We incorporated regional development plan concept into the latest URDPFI guidelines. Then it gives us different guidelines, and what are usually the categorization of the cities, and how the norms and how the guidelines vary from one city to another, how the density should be practiced in small towns, medium towns, large cities, and metropolitan cities. This is just an example. And similarly, it also gives us the gist of how the different housing facilities, let it be the recreational facilities, community halls, and other health associated facilities, education related facilities, how these should be placed. So it gives a proper, of course, area requirement, the standard of the area that is required for each and every type of facility, and also the number of people that should be effectively able to access this particular service. So this is an example of the recreational facilities of different types of parks, of different hierarchy of parks, and the population that it usually serves, and how much area it usually should be. And the core city and peri-urban areas, they usually have a different strategies. As we discussed, again, the redensification and de-densification. I am not ready with any proper case study as of about it right now, but if it is required, I will just provide it in the next session in a detailed manner. And then the fifth question, again, effective method for making land available for new housing, any new development that we are trying to carry out. So it is usually the land assembly. The first one is we try to assemble the land, then accordingly land subdivision and other activities are taken place with respect to the different housing, and then it can be plotted housing, group housing, cooperative housing, etc. So accordingly this happens, but the first step is to have the land, to procure the land whenever we want to develop the new housing. But whenever it is rehabilitation and redevelopment, whenever it is redeveloping an existing land, other tools are applicable, like TDR and rehabilitation. Other tools are applicable when we are redeveloping an existing area, or redensifying or de-densifying an existing area. So again, we discussed about the TDR and how the policy has been developed in India. So in Indian cities, each and every state like Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, different states are developing different TDR policies, and they are having different mechanisms. They are also trying to look at the value capture financing options. So the TDR has also been discussed as one of the value capture financing option by the Ministry of Urban Development in one of the initial reports. I will also try to share that document with you through the Google Drive link, and these are certain case studies which have been provided by the TDR guidelines of NITI Aayog. So there are three different cities, and how the TDR has been used in different cities in order to channelize the development, urban development, and spatial growth in accordingly. So that's it for the today's session, and if there are any doubts, and they are welcome, and we will discuss it. I think we have 10 more minutes left, so we can discuss it. Please remember, you can ask the questions either through the chat box, or you can also unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. If there are no further doubts, I think we can end up the session again. I hope you have enjoyed the session, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. I'm concluding the meeting.